Hey team, welcome to Benchmarked, the leadership, coaching, and mental performance podcast with Coach Mess, here along with Coach LaRock. In this episode, we are going to drill into the idea of building the right culture. JG, I have been looking forward to recording this episode all day, and for several reasons. One, I absolutely love talking about this stuff, especially with you.
Thank you.
Two, it's an area of growth for myself that I want to continue to focus on because I'm always thinking like, man, I could have done this. I could have done this. I wish I would have done this. And three, we've had a chance to talk with so many magnificent leaders on this show and on how they build their own cultures within their teams and businesses. And I want to share with some of that with our listeners. And lastly, I've got a surprise lined up for you for tonight. So I want to get started, man.
I already went to Dairy Queen. What do you got?
Okay, what's your go-to at Dairy Queen, by the way?
Oh, buddy. I got the biggest thing. I always get I keep forgetting the name when you put like peanut butter in it. It's like right in the heart of it. It's not called a signature. It's called a.
This is new to me. Is this like custom secret menu?
No, there's like two of them you can usually get. Man,
it's not like a peanut butter parfait or something.
No. Like literally peanut butter right in the core of it. There's like a certain name for it, but
a blizzard?
Well, it's a blizzard. Yeah, but there's certain type of blizzard.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're speaking some magical stuff right now.
I go you go Oreo blizzard, but like you make it with the peanut butter inside.
Oh.
And yesterday was a Reese's Pieces cookie dough with the peanut butter inside. So good. So good.
This episode brought to you by DQ and JG's thirst for peanut butter on the inside.
What's your go-to? You an Oreo guy?
I'm a Score Blizzard guy.
Oh,
I don't deviate. I don't deviate from Score. Every time I try something else or they bring out some fancy flavor, and I get the minis, right? So it's like because I don't want to feel guilty afterwards.
No.
And it's just enough. It's a taste, but I'm a Score Blizzard guy. Sometimes extra Score, but like Score Blizzard guy.
Royal. That's what they're called. A Royal.
The Royal.
So you ask for a Royal, whatever it is, and they'll either put fudge in it or peanut butter. You gotta tell them.
Oh my God. I gotta tell my mom that. She loves that stuff. Man, that's amazing.
Okay, stay on task here.
All right. So what's really culture, developing, and at the end of the day, we're always talking about doing some really cool things in a team and what's our purpose. What part of our purpose of this podcast is helping people develop better team culture. So whether it's through like our 9 elements or whatever it is, the goal is you want to be a better leader to create a better coach or a better teacher or a better business owner to create an environment or a culture that your employees are going to come to work. They want to do the best job. They want to be happy, fulfilled. Everything lines up and you can put a label of success on it. Does that make sense? Like let's define culture, right? I want to improve the culture. Well, what is it? And I know we just had 2 episodes ago, Coach Hines on, and one of his things, and we say this all the time, we've discussed this on a lot of our shows with multiple people, and even between you and I know we say this to people. It's not a saying. It's not words that you could post up on a room and say, oh, this is our culture. And we've got, and I always say effort or, preparation or whatever. You can, like our 9 elements of successful leadership, our C's, E's, and P's, they're words. But they're words that you have to actually put life into, right? Like as Heinz says, you can put them on a t-shirt and refer to them when they're convenient. It's not going to mean anything. They're living, breathing organisms that got to be nourished and poured into daily. We say mine them and refine them until you get to where you want to go, right?
I brought 2 t-shirts today. It's funny you say it's not just on a t-shirt. I brought our 2 t-shirts we have for our team and our program that we have our players wear. So I'll show theirs a little bit later and why the words are on there, what we kind of do to follow through with some of these things.
Now, as I was thinking as we were prepping for this, how do you start? And I think it's like And you say one of your famous lines is the start is what stops most people. It is a daunting task. So if you're coming in, let's give a scenario. Say you're in a work environment that's toxic. Say you take over a team for a coach that's been fired, and you have to rebuild, right? So you have to look at what's there. Maybe you're starting a new business, and you're going to surround yourself with people that'll thrive and create your culture that you want, and so on. Sorry, you create the culture, you provide the environment, and you want to foster that culture. But to me, I was thinking, like, where would you start? And I think for me personally, I would say it has to start with a self-diagnostic, a period of reflection of where I am, who I am, and where do I want to go with a leader. And we always say is like, what would be my MVP, my mission, my vision, and my core principles, right? And we always refer to that as, we say, what's my why? Well, because I want kids to be better, right? So what's my MVP, mission, vision, core principles?
I started off fresh out of teachers college. I got a contract, went to a big high school, and I was overwhelmed. In my eyes at that time, they already had their culture in place. It's kind of like your high school. It's an older high school, and it has a lot of history and past, and it's amazing. And I felt uncomfortable there. I wanted to go to a smaller school and create my own culture. So that's what I did for about, let's say, 12 years. Went into a place where they basically had no phys ed, had some sports teams. Everything was just started. One of the schools that was like, it was just a grade 9 the first year, just a 9 and 10, just a 9, 10, 11 until it got to 9 through 12. And then sort of kind of build a culture. So I kind of did that. Did some, I think, positive things, some things I should have did a better job with. And that was part of the learning process. And then now moving back to that school. It's funny, I moved back to the school where I was intimidated before of walking into the school. And now I feel really at home and really part of a family in a different type of culture, but really, really good culture with some rich history. So I got to, I think, experience a little bit of both. But like you said, when you go into it and you're trying to build something, because my thing was like, the footprints have already been set. When I was looking at it, like someone's already set the trend in this school or in this team and how things are going to be, and which is great. But I wanted to leave my own footprint is what my mindset was at the same time. And having done both, looking back at where I am in my career, and Mark, I'm assuming you kind of say the same thing. It's different at different times of your life, basically. So if you're a beginning coach, what that looks like, if you're a more seasoned coach, if you're in the halfway point, it's going to be different for all of you. But like Mark's saying, what's your why, what's your mission, what's your vision, what's your core principles? And because at the end of the day, you need to be the constant. Kids are going to come and go. You need to be the consistency in all of this process.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, and I can see what you're saying, like going somewhere that's established. Here's where the diagnostic comes in. Is the establishment good? Not necessarily, maybe. Yeah, exactly. Parts of it might be. So then sometimes, like, one of the things, I had coffee with one of my colleagues this morning, and one of the things we talked about is what we feel makes us successful is we're constantly holding each other accountable. Like, that's a terrible idea. We've been doing this for way too long. It's dated. Let's move on and do something else. Like, we're trying to stay cutting edge. So that's why I always love the youth comes in with great new ideas to share and say, hey, have you considered doing this? You have to be open to that. You have to put the ego aside. Same thing if I'm starting a business and I don't know everything. Remember, we've talked about this before as well. Like, you can't be the master of everything. If you do that, you're going to spin out of control. Hire good people, bring good people in that are specialists in certain things that will make you look good. And to me, that's an amazing concept to do. And I know some people love going to start new schools because they have that opportunity to start from scratch and say, this is our culture, which is kind of cool. So you just segued me into our surprise, buddy. And I don't want to wait because I'm like a kid at Christmas. I just want to wrap this gift.
I'm the worst for gifts, man. I can buy something like for 3 months from now and I'll ruin it tomorrow and tell you what it is. I'm the worst.
That's why I always wait till the last minute. I don't have to do that.
I'm gonna use that. That's one last minute.
So before we go any further, I want to give a shout out and say we're going to dedicate this show to the KCI Raiders senior boys rugby team.
No.
Yes.
I was wondering. I wanted to ask yesterday. Do tell.
All right. So here's what I'm going to tell you. And then the reason why, and I did not, for our listeners, the JG just talked about like an established school. And one of our, I'm going to say he's our friend now because we made friends with Coach Cody Roberts from Kitchener-Waterloo. And he teaches at a high school called Kitchener Collegiate Institute. And he's the rugby coach there. And he attended a coaching seminar that JG and I were putting on this winter. And he attended all 6 of our sessions, and we had some very rich conversations. And one of the concepts that we talked about in the seminar was the cookie jar. And JG, you are going to love this. And when Cody called me today and we talked, as I said, hey, I want to bring up your story about your cookie jar. And I said, can I mention you by name and talk about? He's like, yeah. And I actually invited him to be on the podcast. He's like, no, I don't. He wasn't ready for that. So I was like, okay, I'll pass on the story. So Cody, next time. I was like, oh, JG's going to love this. I'm going to surprise him with this. So he wanted an idea. So he's been coaching rugby now for a long time. And he wanted to establish a
I'm like a kid at Christmas right now, by the way.
Oh, I'm so excited to this.
Go.
I don't want to blow this. I got to take my time because I don't want to blow any of this because I prepped this hard for you. So Cody said, I want some ideas on how to establish a better culture in my team. And so we gave him the idea of a cookie jar. And so our idea of a cookie jar is you have something, you can do it personally, you can do it for a team. And what the cookie jar is it's no secret. David Goggins uses this all the time. And he talks about you got to put cookies, ideas into the cookie jar. Like, hey, I did really well today. I did my homework. You could put it like on a sticky note and you put it in a jar and you make deposits in the cookie jar. Like, I hit a home run today. It's confidence builders. It's character builders. They're all the little things. I do this with my senior kids a lot and in classes and have them write down one good thing they've done every week. And they put it in the cookie jar. And at the end, when things are going hard and they're stressed out, or if you're a team and you want to look back at all the good things that you've done to build up, or times are tough, you take withdrawals out of that cookie jar. So like, how you're saying you're running a marathon and every mile is something else. You put a different thought in your mind, and I'm going to make withdrawals now when things are tough. So Cody wanted an idea to develop on that. And what we did was we stayed on after the seminar and we were brainstorming some stuff. And you gave him the idea of dropping something in a bucket, like a drop in a bucket. So the idea was because it makes an audible noise. So here's what Cody did. And this is what I want to share with all our listeners. And you want to talk about building team culture. We're talking home run here. Or since we're dedicating this to a rugby team, we're going to say this is like multiple tries. They came up with this. So Cody's idea was nuts and bolts. And so nuts and bolts, and what he had was he had a massive glass jar. So like a growler of beer, first of all. So if you like a mass, I forget how many, it's like maybe like a 5-liter jug is what he had. I don't know how many gallons that is for our American listeners, but it's big. So the idea of nuts and bolts is when you build large buildings, you need big pieces, right? The concrete, the rebar, the steel beams, all that stuff. But you also need the small things. So you and I talk about process over outcome all the time, habits, accountability, and all the small things. And Cody really took that to heart. So the small things, he says, hold the big things together. You need the nuts and bolts, okay? So, but the funny thing is about the nuts and bolts is that you can't see them, but they're there, right? So once you put the building together, a lot of times you don't see, they're hidden behind drywall, they're hidden behind steel wall, whatever, you don't see them. So for them, that meant all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that makes a difference in their performance. You liking this so far?
But I'm gonna cry.
So as he's telling me this, I said, this is like I had 3 sets of chills when he's talking to me on the phone about their experience this year. So he said to his team, and to give you a little bit of a preface, they had a rough start. They had one of their players that got themselves into some some trouble at the beginning of the season.
Senior player, right?
What's that?
Senior player
got himself into a little bit of hot water at the very, I think might have been one of their first practices or something. And he turned it around. And rather than discipline the kid in a way that would have maybe isolated him, embarrassed him, or whatever, he wanted the kid to take responsibility, extreme ownership. And this player addressed the team and says, this was not me being a good leader. He took absolute responsibility and ownership for his actions. And he says, I need to turn this around and I need to be better for my teammates. And that was the springboard for the rest of their season. So back to the nuts and bolts. So he was so proud of these guys, and he said, we're going to celebrate all the little things that we do together as a team on and off the field. So for everything you do, you'd put a nut or a bolt into, 20-liter glass jar. I'm wrong. He says a 20-liter glass jar. So JG, explain to our listeners why we want something that makes a noise.
So I had read this in a book called Made to Stick. And I can't remember the author, I apologize, but Made to Stick, there's literally got duct tape on the cover. So what they were trying to explain to people, he said, so here's an example they'll give. If you're trying to, giving money to kids in Africa, example, this is the kind of the example they're giving. So, when they did some research, people would give maybe $2 per person type of thing. But when they made it specific to a certain person, so you name the person, their age, and you get a kind of a physical description, people were donating like twice the amount of money because it came a little bit personal. So that was the first part to this. The next part, he said, when you make it loud and visual, people remember that. So there was somebody who was trying to tell, they were going like place to place, telling them how many missiles the United States has, to really kind of get a grasp. And I could tell you, hey, Mark, the US has 1 million missiles. And you're like, whatever. So what these people would do to get their point across, he said they would get a big tin bucket and they would grab BBs, big BBs, like big alleys almost. And they would drop one in, and then the other one, in the other one, in the other one. So just that sound kind of made you realize like there's a million of these coming. So it's the sound, it's the presence that kind of wakes you up, because we just say a number and people just kind of tune that out. When you can hear a number and you can feel it and see it, it's a totally different conversation.
Breathes life into it, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
So 20 liters. So this thing's massive. That's a lot of beer, by the way. So again, he intentionally chose the jar so that it made a noise every time a player put one in. And he wanted to encourage the player. He said, I encourage, this is his words, I encouraged all players to ask what each other did to warrant the entry, not to question each other, but to celebrate other success. So he said, good thing they have an auto shop at their school, because they needed a lot of old nuts and bolts to fill this up. And so I said, Cody, I want to examples. Everybody's going to have different things of what warrants me putting something into your jar here. Yeah.
So sorry, didn't he, I don't know if you're getting to this or not, but didn't he have that young man that got in trouble at the beginning drop the first one in the bucket?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, he took ownership of his situation and he dropped the first one in the bucket, and that just kind of steamrolled. So, and the other thing too is, and well, we'll get to this. That's a great question. But yeah, that young man, I believe, was the first guy to drop something in the bucket. So for example, staying up late on Friday night to study, because say maybe they were going to miss class for a game or something like that. They had a test on Monday. So they're staying up, waking up early, going to bed early, doing your homework, going for a run on the weekend, sitting at a front of class instead of out with your buddies in the back of the classroom, asking your teacher for extra help, different things like that. He even talked about one time where they had an entire school assembly, and a couple of his players stayed behind to clean up chairs, and they gave themselves some nuts and bolts for that, big time, community stuff. That is amazing, right? Helping an old lady across the street, whatever it is. They basically felt like if there was good being done, they deserved to drop something in this jar. And they looked at it, it's like, they paid rent. He says, I was paying rent. They wanted to make sure that there was an audible sound and you're paying into this because it was going to pay off in the end. So he had talked about, and he got this from our seminar, about discipline versus motivation. Because discipline is hard, motivation is easy. And we just talked about this recently, is motivation will fool you. So Cody's a believer in that as well. So he talked, the boys were fired up after the first meeting when they said they were going to do this and they were going to put the work in along the way. And basically the nuts and bolts was about celebrating the discipline each one of us was doing to help the team. After you place yours into the jar, he says, can you pick it out among the crowd? Like, so say if you got a jar with 300 bolts in there, and this was starting to get to me now. As he's telling me this, I'm starting to get chills now, right? He's like, you can't tell yours from others, right? You can't tell, because as the jar starts filling up over the course of the season, it's like, I can't tell which is my bolt in there because I'm just putting in with my teammates. It becomes the team's. So that's our idea of service over status. So I'm putting this in there for my team. I'm making a deposit for my team so that when times get tough, we can make a withdrawal. I was just like, man, this is just amazing. So he says, and the kids bought in. They were in. They had this in their team room, and he sent me pictures, and I'll post them along with the episode here. You could see that, and you could see the jars starting to get filled up where it was at the beginning of the season and where it was at the end of the season. So what they were saying was their team slogan was becoming, hey, nuts and bolts, baby. We're putting nuts and bolts in, right? And they even got t-shirts made with nuts, and people are asking them, like, what do you have a t-shirt with a nut and bolt on them? And I was like, I love it. I love it. So really, real cool stuff. So they made it to the regional semifinals, but lost by 1 point. They lost by 1 point in a rugby game at the regional semifinals. And he's like, it was just an unbelievable feeling. And he says, as much as it hurt to lose, but he said the team and himself and his coaches felt lifted by all the cool things that had been going on throughout the year. Doing those small things mattered so much because he says when we were hit with failure for the first time as a team, early in the year, we had the nuts and bolts of everyone around us to strengthen us and help us through it. During the last meeting they had in their celebration of their team, he brought the big glass jar and then a smaller jar. And he says, I asked what the goal of the nuts and bolts was. Was it to fill the jar? Well, if that was the case, then our season would have been defined on the size of the jar. Large jar equals fail because we didn't fill it. Small jar, we would have won because it was smaller than what our bolts could have held. But the same number of nuts and bolts was in the jar. Perspective was so important. And he says, our season was defined more by the small things we did every day to prepare ourselves to be better in rugby and in life. And JG, this is just, I was like, oh man, like I'm starting to get emotional thinking about this. Each kid asked to take a nut and a bolt for them after the season as a reminder of the nuts and bolts things that you need to be successful over the course of a season and your life. And he talked about a young man who had some challenges in his own personal life and had some tough times. And he'd written the words nuts and bolts on his arm as a reminder of what's important. And I'm going to read you the letter that this coach, Cody Roberts, got from his team after the season. Dear Robbo, great nickname, by the way. Words can't describe how thankful we are to have had you as a coach this year. Thank you for all the lessons you taught us on and off the field. Nuts and bolts, baby. Thank you for showing us the importance of celebrating the little accomplishments. This, represented by the glass jar filled with nuts and bolts, created a visual representation of this motto that we will all use for the rest of our lives. Discipline is greater than motivation. With our many goals we set this year came several ups and downs. This drove us to become extremely motivated. Thank you for showing us how important it is to stay composed and understand what you're fighting for. And they always use the motto, once we had a victory, we went on to the next job and the next task. As many of us are moving on in a new chapter of our life, it is important we don't dwell on the past and focus on our next job. It has been an honor playing for you, Mr. Roberts. Thank you for helping create this group of brothers who will remain such for the rest of our lives. Thank you for showing us it's okay to show emotion, because emotion can be one of your biggest motivations in life. As stated before, we could never have asked for a better coach, better teacher, better friend. Thank you. KCI Senior Boys Rugby Team 2022. Man, like, it's not even my team.
Wow.
Cody, man, like, again, I'm grateful. I know JJ, thanks for sharing that with us, because you talk about purpose and your why. And yeah, you didn't win the gold medal at the end of the season, but that's a world championship right there, in my opinion, man. It doesn't get any better than that. You want to talk about culture now? That's culture. And that's why I wanted to kind of bring that up today and say, like, we got teams that are putting sayings up on the wall and doing things, but are they actually living and breathing it like this team was? You know, my little sticky notes in an envelope, that's like, I can never go back now. Cody Roberts has ruined me for my stupid little cookie jar method, you know, and the fact that like the it's such a great metaphor though. You can't see it. I love that stuff. Like,
yeah, that's what you're talking about, like the nuts and bolts are behind, you know, the drywall or the whatever.
Yeah.
Nobody sees that, but that's literally what's holding everything together. Like that's deep, man. That's like next level stuff.
Surprise, coach. That's your surprise for this evening.
That's a great surprise.
You know,
I was going to ask you yesterday when we were doing a show, what was up? And I'm glad I didn't, because I got to hear this. And that's the cool part. Mark and I got to meet Cody in Kitchener. We were there for some baseball. So we went and hung out for about an hour or so, wherever the case may be. And just a great human being. And it was funny because, you know, he listened to our presentation, but we were like, basically when he was talking, we were both kind of like just listening to everything he had to say, and how he, like, it's like you give somebody an idea and they just run like way further than you ever thought or even possible. And that's exactly what Cody did. Super inspirational. Congratulations. And thank you so much for sharing, Cody.
Yeah. And I asked him, like, so, you know, and like, what do you do next year for the kids that are coming back? Do you, because to me, culture is something that can carry over from year to year. So I think now this is the tough decision for Coach Roberts. Is he going to carry on? It's for the kids that are coming back in, that are going to be seniors next year, that were part of this program now. You put your nuts and bolts in this year. That's part of my opinion, and I don't want to force Cody to do something, but to me, there's a carryover of tradition year to year. There's a carryover of culture. There's a carryover of expectation. There's a carryover of success. And that is the success right there that we want for our athletes. The fact that it carried kids through some challenging times, the fact that it carried the team through that, like you talk about, like now, I would hope like people that like in his school and on other teams are going to take this. These kids that might coach in their communities down the road, the ripple effect from this is going to be felt generations from now because of this gentleman's passion for his kids and his team. And just like absolute, almost utmost respect. Crazy.
I kind of like, and you talk about how things kind of progress through, or they kind of follow you, I guess, in a little bit of a culture. And it makes me more going to have a show that'll air with Blake Sloan, and he had talked about I can't remember, NHL player forever, I can't remember his name, but when Michigan won their national championship, you know, what was the guy, like 18, 19 years old, and when he spoke, you know, at the arena, like, hey, what does it feel like to win a national championship? And his first words are basically that this is for all the guys that came before us that never had the chance to win this. Like, you guys kind of set the groundwork for us to be successful here. And this is honestly what I think is going to happen with Cody and his school and his team, wherever he goes, is that foundation. Like that group of young men created literally nuts and bolts, and they might not have seen or might not see how this is going to play out down the road, but it's because of them that I think that school is going to do well and be successful, not only in football. That is what it is. We talked about wins and losses in our previous show, but I think that's going to be the groundwork. And then hopefully there's somebody mature enough down the road that's going to say, hey, that team in 2022, you guys kind of set the groundwork for us to be successful where we are today
Yeah.
as young men, community leaders, parents, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I mean, if I'm a part of that, I'm like, I don't think I even have to win a game, and that's a successful season. I don't know. We talked about this the other day. Like, you eventually have to win. I know I put you on the spot, but to me, I would be willing to bet. Like, this is anecdotally, but and I asked you the question: how does driving your culture and your vision actually turn into wins on the scoreboard? Doing this type of stuff absolutely turns into wins on the scoreboard, because those guys now are playing for one another. They're playing for the coach. They're doing it for all the right reasons. And when the going gets tough, it's going to be good. So it does turn into the opportunities to play in a regional semifinal. Like, that's a big deal, right? That's a big deal. So it's not the loss that matters in this season. No, it's all the wonderful things that they did.
So when I hear this more and more that we're talking about it out loud, I'll say it. I feel confident that if you don't have the right culture, like, it's just a ticking time bomb. You can be successful now, but that thing is literally a ticking time bomb. Time bomb that's ready to go off at any time, because you don't have the nuts and bolts in place, and this thing's gonna, it's gonna fall. It's gonna be a trapdoor eventually if you don't have the right things in place. That's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, for example, like, the idea of individual kids being recognized, and the least, the last, and the lost, those are the kids that in your program, it's easy to gravitate to your stud. And we've had a couple of guests that said, like, those are the easy ones. You don't have, like, it's the kids that are the nuts and bolts of a team that often put it together. I saw a great, I forget who it was, a baseball coach. I think it was Earl Weaver that said the All-Star game, the MLB All-Star game, should have a position for a utility guy, because they're absolutely so important to a team. Like, let's use an example, like Espinal for the Blue Jays this year. I think he's played every position on the field except catcher.
Biggio's another one.
What's that?
Biggio's another one.
And Biggio's, yes, you're right. Yeah. And those are the nuts and bolts guys. The glue, we call them sometimes, the glue is another term for these. And we don't celebrate those guys enough. We don't talk to them enough. We don't give them the attention they deserve, but they do matter to our team, right? So cool. So cool. I sent you that tweet this morning about the story of who packs your parachute. And yeah, you thought that was pretty cool, eh? That's a great story about, like, this Air Force pilot that was shot down in Vietnam, and he was getting shot at. He's coming down. His plane's, got blown out of the sky. He's coming down. He's getting shot at, and as he's about to pull a ripcord in his parachute, he's like, I don't know who packed my parachute. He's actually literally thinking, is my parachute going to open? And his parachute opens, and he's getting shot in the air. He survives. He was in a POW camp for 6 years. 6 years. So the story goes, he was in a restaurant in Kansas City with his wife and another couple. And he said some dude was looking at him, and he's like, I don't know this guy. Why is he staring at me? Why is this person? Do I know this person? I can't place them. And this person at the restaurant finally got up, walked up to him, and patted him on the shoulder. He says, hey, you're so-and-so. You were POW for 6 years. He named the days. You flew off of this plane or off this boat. This was your plane that got blown up. And he says, I'm so-and-so. I packed your parachute that morning. And the guy was just, oh my God, you literally saved my life. And so it's like, you don't know these people. Then those are, to me, are the nuts and bolts people that make a difference in the day-to-day stuff. We talk about your custodians at school, or how are we treating our custodians, our secretaries, staff. Like, these are the things that are so important that we can't forget. And just dropping those things in the bucket, you don't see them, but they're there and they're important. Man, I don't even know.
It's easy to see the big pieces. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I know. It's because it's easy to see the big pieces of everything. I don't know how to describe it. You described it 15 times super well, so I don't know what else I'm going to add to it. But yeah, it's all I can see. It's easy to, the big fish in the small pond. It's easy to recognize this, easy to recognize that. Like, you got to start digging. We got to dig in mine refinement. You got to dig to be able
And
to find what's the purest, I guess.
yeah, and it's hard work. You're going to get your knuckles bloody and it's going to stink. But at the end, you're left with gold and diamonds and all the beautiful stuff, right? And to me, this is again, and I know I'm a broken record on this. Status drives failure. I get frustrated with athletes, coaches, especially coaches and leaders and teachers who put status over service. And to me, that's getting it wrong. And I think it's magical. Like if you talk to any team who's at the top of, or any athlete that's at the top of their game, they're going to say, because I'm doing it for my teammates. I'm working hard. I'm doing this because I don't want to disappoint the other people in my team. I'm doing this because of so-and-so, not because I'm doing this for me. Right. And Dr. Gilbert says it all the time too in his podcast. He says, everybody, we've got a team. Like even an individual athlete has a team behind them. If you're a pro golfer, you've got your physio staff, you've got your, you know what I mean? Like you got all these, your strength and conditioning coach, you got all these people behind you. You are part of that team. So to me, it's the idea of when you play to serve others, you build trust and love and success will follow, right?
I never understood, like when we're watching the Academy Awards or whatever you're watching, and I never understood, like, I'd like to thank, and they just go off and off and off. These people that have no idea who they are. I'm like, who cares? That's not, the big names or anything like that. But now as you progress through life and you learn more about these types of things, Josh Ross, same thing, where he's talking about, like, if I'm not doing what I'm doing, some people around me, they're not eating.
Yeah.
Right. So like it's not, yeah, he's up on the stage saying, but he's doing that for himself. He's doing it for everybody else that's around him and vice versa. They're doing the best they can to make sure he puts the best product out there because they're all surrounded each other. Like it's such a team. Yeah. Everything is about a team.
Yeah. And what I look at it, and I've always thought and understood this, and I read this in Andre Lachance and Jean-François Menard's book, Team Chemistry. What? What?
Oh, watch! I'll replay it right here. So it was just like in the book I was reading, Andre Lachance and Jean-François Menard. like what the hell is that?
Okay, let me start.
You went to Paris. You left like Sault Ste. Marie. You went to Paris, and now you're back in Burlington.
In their book, Team Chemistry, Andre Lachance and Jean-François Menard, they talk about coaching and leadership. It's like customer service. Like you're there to serve others, right? The best are there in a service capacity. Like, what can I do for you as a coach that's going to help you, right? It's not that transactional relationship that we've talked about before. It's a transformational relationship that we got to try to foster as educators, as leaders. It's the same idea in the business world, right? And now you got to keep employees. How are you going to do that? Give them good pay, treat them well, right? Make them part of that family. It's going to be awesome. So, the best of the best do things differently, and it starts with building the right culture, right? And that's how, it dictates how people treat each other, how they respond to adversity, how they perform at the highest levels, regardless of what it is they're doing. And when you create that right culture, you're going to have more predictable and consistent outcomes at the end of the day, right? That's what you want. Predictability and consistent. Like, this pains me to say it, but the Yankees are going to be pretty darn good every year, right? So, you can kind of bank on it. Like, they're going to be a tough team to beat. So to me, that's what building that culture is. You're going to catch and pass the competition that's ahead of you. I think if you build the right culture, like, you're just going to keep grinding away. It might take a time, but you're going to get there. And
but that's the difference. The people that are willing to keep going.
Yeah.
Not fail, quit, fail, quit, fail, quit. If you're willing to fail, get back up, fail, get back up. That's the right culture. That's what's going to progress to the right spot. Sorry cutting you off there, but
you're right.
I think we missed the boat on that because we don't have instant success. We're like, oh, this is a bad culture. Oh, this is. No, man, trust the process. Go through the process.
Yeah.
If you trust the people that are around you anyway.
And you're going to have problems. Like, there's going to be some players that come in, and you're going to have some people that come into your organization that will be problematic. So, like, sometimes if you're coaching a team and you get these players and they don't buy in, and it's difficult. And I want to talk about this. And I think what you have to do is One, again, it's that 10-80-10, and we'll do a whole show on the 10-80-10 idea. If a player resists or an employee resists buy-in, I think what you need to do is you need to be more clear on what you're asking them to buy into. So if I'm hiring somebody, this is what I want. I want to be crystal clear on what they're going to be getting themselves into. I say that to my kids all the time. The teams that I coach, I even say to my classes, like, are you sure you want to spend 4 months with me right now? Like, this is a lot of time. You're going to see me every day. So like, but you're going to buy into the program. So there's 4 stages of buy-in. So as a leader, if you understand the 4 stages of buy-in from the people that you're trying to get to buy in, it really helps you kind of paint a picture of where everybody is. It's like a continuum. So stage 1 is, this is not for me, right? So we talk about, let's use Cody's example of the nuts and bolts. So you might have a kid that'd be like, yes, like, for example, on our football team, we got 65 kids. That's a lot of people to get to be pulling on the same rope on the same direction, right? So the stage 1 is, it's not for me. Stage 2, yeah, it's okay for others. So I'm not going to disrespect it, but it's okay for others, but I'll keep it at arm's length. Stage 3 is the key. This is where you suck them in and say, I'll try it. Okay, so I see JG dropping a bolt in the bucket. I see Gabrielle and Caleb, they're dropping bolts. And I was like, I don't want to be part of this bucket thing in this jar, dropping washers and bolts and nuts into a jar. I don't want to be part of this. And then the final stage and the 4th stage is, I can't believe it. I did it any other way. It's like the athletes that finally go out and say, I need a mental performance coach, or maybe I need to change my diet. How did I not do it? Why did I wait so long? And that's what some people are like, why resist? We're telling you this stuff works. Just do it.
It's funny. I'm laughing because I did a TV interview yesterday with Parker Savard, one of our coaches and a collegiate player. And we literally had the same exact conversation. I said, what's the difference, between you were a freshman in college and now you're going into your senior year? And he's like, the light switch. I said, what do you mean the light switch? He goes, when I was a freshman, I thought I could just turn on the light switch whenever I wanted. I'd be able to perform. And he's like, there's no light switch. It wasn't working. So he goes, now I have to fall back on my training, mental performance. I need to have all of my ducks in a row, basically. Where I used to think that stuff wasn't for me. When I was a freshman, like, I don't need this, man. I can play. I'll be fine. Mm. And then as a senior, and he got to see that, as a freshman, see the seniors, like, what's different about them? And that was the difference. They had all the pieces of the puzzle, not all of them, obviously, at any school, but they had the pieces ready to go because they needed the mental performance. They needed to sleep. They knew what they needed to eat. They learned that process. So if we can teach our athletes at a younger age to be able to do it, and you think about that, how much more success you can have, example, through a 4-year career at university. If you pick that up earlier instead of like, nah, I'm good. Then I'm good. It's not for me. Then by the time you're senior, you're like, oh man, I wish I would have, or I wish I could have.
Yep. Well, and let's break it down. We want to talk numbers like that. It's like, again, we said this in a couple episodes ago. It's free. And we're telling you, like, here's a free tool that's going to make you great. Here's another free tool that's going to make you great. It's all out there. It's all out there. And why wait? So let me give it perspective. I say this to football players because you don't play as many games. So say like for the most we've had a season, an undefeated season. We were 16-0. Okay, so 16 games. You made it all the way to that. Well, that was a national championship. We played 16 games. We were 16-0. So let's just say on an average football season, a high school football season, you get 12 games, right? So as a senior, you're going to play 2 years of that. So maybe you get 24 games. So imagine if you love football and you're passionate about football, forget about your freshman and sophomore years. Now, the game that you love, that you're passionate about, if you're lucky and you're on a decent team, you're going to get 24 games in your high school career. That's not a lot. It really isn't a lot. So, how am I going to make the most out of it? And then say you go to college. Say you make it to college program. How many games are you going to play at college? If you don't play your freshman year, maybe you get a chance to play in your sophomore year, a couple of games. And then by your junior and senior year, you're playing. Well, what are you going to get? You're going to get another 24 games under your belt. And then all of a sudden the game ends. So it's like baseball's a tough one because in the big leagues, they play 1,000 games a year. But at college and in minor sports, you're not playing that many games. Like you might get 60. And so every year. Those things count. So your opportunities are limited. If you look at it this way, if I know I have an infinite amount of at bats and a finite, sorry, not infinite, a finite amount of at bats, I want to make sure that I am going to do exactly what I possibly can, as much as I possibly can, to make the most out of each and one of those, every one of those at bats.
And keeping on the theme of baseball, you'll talk to some of the best players ever, and they regret, I wasted 10 at bats this year. If I would have had 5 hits out of those 10, I would have hit 300 or whatever it is, because they just mentally give up at bats. Or in football, you can give up a down or two, and then in hockey, you give up a shift or two. Like when you think about it, you start calculating those over a season, over a 4-year career, and you're just like, wow, I literally wasted almost a season, where I wasted 12 games out of 36 that I played.
Yeah.
So it adds up if you can kind of stick with the process.
Yeah. Wow. It's pretty cool. And I think for coaches, it will get frustrating, but don't stop sharing the message of keep going. Let's keep going. Let's stick with the theme of nuts and bolts. We will continue to drop nuts and bolts into the jar. And I want to do this until everybody buys in, because that's the culture. That's your mission, vision, and your core principles. And you want everybody to buy into it. Stay with it. And every year, diagnostic test, is this working? Is this a good thing? Can I improve? Can I delete? Can I add? What am I doing? Right?
Roger that.
Oh, man.
I talked about the shirts, so I'll show the shirts now.
Yeah.
So these are our practice shirts. So for us, what I like having the guys wear these during practice during the week. Can you see that?
Yep. A little higher. Yeah.
Good.
Process. So let me read it. Voyageurs baseball, process over outcome. Love it.
So those will be the practice shirts during the week. And what we talk about during the practice is basically that's what it is. It's about the process. So for baseball specifically, Mark, you can talk about football or other sports. So, you throw the ball away, that's part of the process. You drop a fly ball, it's part of the process. You strike out during inter-squad game, that's part of the process. So we're all aware, and you build that culture of process. This is all part of the process. We're not asking you to be perfect. We're asking you to buy into the process. The success will come along the line. But again, back to culture, you have to create the culture that it's okay. I can't tell you, don't worry about it. It's okay to drop a fly ball. But then I'm reaming you out for the same thing that I'm telling you, don't worry about. It's part of the process. So you can't speak out of both sides of your mouth on that. So you have to be conscious of that. So that's how the week plays out. And then we get to weekends. So their undershirts for the weekend are these next ones here that I'm going to pop up and Mark can read. Here we go.
Shout out to Mizuno, our sponsors, for these wonderful shirts. All in. All in.
So now it gets to weekend time, and now we're just all in. We practiced the whole week. Now it's all in time. So we'll do the thing, check in, everyone responds all in. And then sometimes we'll go through, I'll do it for my classes actually at school. Check in, everyone responds all in. And I'll say, Messier's going to say all in.
All in.
And just keep going through the line basically, the players that they're all in, they're dialed in, we're checked in, and we're gonna go to war together basically. That's how that process works.
I'm doing that in September, by the way. All in. That's how we're doing attendance in my classes. All in. And I think we should do it. Like we check in for football, because you got to do that same idea. We do attendance because we get so many guys. Like we want to know who's there and who's not. It's going to be an all in. So I love it. And that's an example of, you don't just have the words on a t-shirt. You're actually living it, and you're mining it, and you're refining it, and you're creating a connection from the meaning of the words and the saying and the phrases. And they're seeing it all over, because I know you have it up on the wall in your facility as well, the process over outcome. So they're seeing it, they're living it, they're experiencing it, and then they're taking it to the game, and it's all in. Everything I've done now builds up to this, which is just so good. So good.
You got it. And it's not going to happen the first week. If I'm talking to coaches now, or bosses, it's not going to, don't expect that this is going to happen the first day, the first week, the first month. Again, you have to buy into the process, and it's not going to be easy. But if you trust the process, you'll understand it, and it's a little easier to swallow if you're willing to go through it.
So,
here we go.
What's that?
You're getting philosophical. I can see it.
No. Okay. Well, to me, it's like it goes back to the MVP. And I say this to people, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" Your MVP, mission, vision, core principles. It's a launch pad. So your mission as a coach, you are developing a program. You're developing athletes in that program, right? You have a vision for kids to continue to go on and have the opportunity. You're literally giving these kids the opportunity to do what they need to do to get to the next level if they choose to. If they choose not to, that's fine. They're going to have one hell of a good experience playing in that organization. And then through that, you have your core principles of all the stuff that we do on a daily basis and the messages that the kids and the families are getting about being good teammates and blah, blah, blah. So that's your MVP. And that is the most important player on your team is your MVP, but it's not necessarily a person. It's the nuts and bolts.
Program.
It's the program.
It's bigger than you. It is bigger than you.
Wow. We're going to continue. We're going to do this again. And I am going to convince Cody to come on the show one day. So like I don't know if I've done his story justice or not, but that was awesome. And I think I'm grateful the fact that we've had a chance to meet another, just a great coach, like a CGP certified great person.
Oh my God.
So listeners, we want to hear from you. There's more Codys out there. Well, I hope there's more Codys out there. We want to hear from you. Send us a message, DM us, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, email benchmarkedpodcast@gmail.com. What's the coolest thing you've used to build your team culture in your team, in your business, in your organization, in your classroom? We want to know if you got some really cool ideas, and we want to share it with everyone who listens to our show.
Love it.
Well, yeah, I'm all in, Coach. I'm all in.
Yes.
Well, that does it for this episode of Benchmarked. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
Keep crushing.